This is Algebra 2, test number 8. We got through lesson 5.5, completing the square. This is a study guide for test number 8. First one says 8x squared plus 12x minus 16. Factor the expression. What you're looking for is a term that you can multiply by and get each of the terms that are up there. So we have 8x squared as one term, 12x squared, and negative 16. The only thing that goes into all three terms is the number 4. So if we take the number 4 out, we know if we multiply 4 times 2x squared, we get 8x squared. 4 times 3x, we get 12x. And 4 times negative 4, you get negative 16. So 4 is the number that comes out. However, if you look at your answer choices, 4 is not an option. The only option there is negative 4. But if you notice on that one, by changing all the signs, negative 4 times negative 2x will give you 8x squared. Negative 4 times negative 3x is plus 12x, and negative 4 times positive 4 is minus 16. So D is the correct answer for number 1. Simplify square root of negative 175 using the imaginary number I. So the square root of negative 175. Remember, all you have to do with this one is to take the negative value out, is to multiply it by I. So I times the square root of positive 175. Then you could break down the square root of 175 down into the square root of 25 times the square root of 7. So I times each of those radicals. We know that the square root of 25 is 5 times the square root of 7, still I times that. So just changing the order of I times 5, we call it 5I times the square root of 7. 5I times the square root of 7. Write it in the form A plus BI. So we have the square root of negative 4 plus 10. Again, get rid of the negative value under the radical symbol by taking I and multiplying it by it. So I times the square root of 4 plus 10. I times 2 plus 10. And if you write it, just changing the order I times 2 and changing it to 2 times I plus 10. If you write it in A plus B times I, or the thing that's multiplying times I, putting it second, it would be 10 times 2I. I'm sorry, 10 plus 2 times I. 10 plus 2I, C. Negative 6 minus square root of negative 48. Again, get rid of the negative value under the radical by multiplying it by I. So negative 6 minus I times the square root of 48. Then break the square root of 48 down into 16 times 3. We still have negative 6 minus I times that. So negative 6 minus I times 4, because the square root of 16 is 4, times the square root of 3. Just changing the order of negative I times 4. Negative 6 minus 4I times the square root of 3. X squared plus 18x plus 81 equals 25. Notice that x squared plus 18x plus 81 is already a perfect trinomial. We know it's a perfect trinomial because the first term, you can take the square root of it, and the last term, 81, you can take the square root of it. So when we take the square root of x squared, we get the number, or we get the term x. When we take the square root of the term 81, we get 9. So the sign in the middle, this plus, the one that's before the bx value, plus tells you what to put between the x and a 9. So x plus 9 squared. So we took that perfect trinomial and we made it a binomial squared, equals 25. Then to get rid of squaring x plus 9, you take the square root of the entire side. If you take the square root of the left, you have to do likewise to the right, square root of 25. So now you have x plus 9 equals 5, or negative 5, because it's both positive and negative 5 multiplied by themselves will give you 25. So get rid of plus 9 by subtracting 9 from each of the terms. 5 minus 9 is negative 4, or negative 5 minus 9 is negative 14. So your two possible answers, negative 4 and negative 14. That would be B. Six says find the missing value to complete the square. x squared plus bx plus c. You need to find the value of c. Remember, c is found as b over 2, the thing that's multiplying by x over 2 squared. In this case, b's value is 2. So 2 over 2, or 2 divided by 2, is the number 1, and 1 squared is 1. So c's value is 1, b. 7 says solve it by completing the square. Let's back up just a little bit. It says x squared plus 10x plus 14 equals 0. The first thing you need to do is you need to get rid of plus 14 by subtracting it from both sides. So x squared plus 10x, when you subtract it on the left, it'll cancel out. If you subtract it from the right, you get negative 14. So just what's written in red here, x squared plus 10x equals negative 14. You have to find the value of c. Remember, it's x squared plus bx plus c. We need to find which c is. In order to find c, you need to take b. In this case, it's 10, the thing that's multiplying by x, and divide it by 2. You get the number 5, and 5 squared is 25. So c's value in this case is going to be 25. So that's why we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. That's c's value. That's simply plugging in c. If you put 25 plus 25 on the left, you have to include plus 25 on the right, or you'll change the equation. So now we have a perfect trinomial, x squared plus 10x plus 25. The reason we know it's perfect is because you can take the square root of x squared, the first term, and the square root of 25, the third term. So when we take the square root of x squared, it gives us x, and when we take the square root of 25, it gives us 5. Remember, the sign before b, plus, tells you what goes between x and 5, so x plus 5, and you take that binomial and square it. Then adding negative 14 and positive 25, you get plus 11. So x plus 5 squared equals 11. In order to get rid of the squaring of x plus 5, you take the square root of it. If you do the left, you have to do the right. That leaves you with x plus 5 equals the square root of 11. Then get rid of plus 5 by subtracting it. If you subtract from the left, you have to subtract from the right. Negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 11. So negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 11, D for number 7. X squared plus 10x plus 35 equals 0. On number 5, we already had a perfect trinomial from the beginning. The rest of them since then, they have not been perfect. You can tell, you can take the square root of x squared, but you can't take the square root of 35. So it's not a perfect trinomial. So what we need to do is we need to move plus 35 over by subtracting plus 35. When you subtract it from the left, you have to subtract it from the right. You get negative 35 on the right, just what's in red here. Then you need to find the value of c. Remember, c is b divided by 2 squared. B's value in this case is 10, the thing that's multiplying by x. So 10 over 2 is 5, and 5 squared is 25. And that's why it says plus 25 after 10x, and it says plus 25 on the right, because if you add 25 to the left, you have to add 25 to the right. So now we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. That's a perfect trinomial. Take the square root of x squared, and it gives you x, and take the square root of 25, and it gives you 5. Remember, this sign, the one before b, is what tells you what goes between x and 5. So x plus 5, take that binomial and square it, equals negative 35 plus 25 is negative 10. In order to get rid of x plus 5 squared, you have to take the square root of it. So the square root of that whole side and the square root of this side. That'll leave you with just x plus 5 equals the square root of negative 10. But remember, you can't have a radical with a negative under it. So in order to take the negative from under that radical, you multiply it by I. So x plus 5 equals I times 10. Then get rid of plus 5 on the left by subtracting it. Do likewise on the right. X equals negative 5 plus or minus I times 10. Negative 5 plus or minus I times 10. That's D. Okay, rewriting in vertex form, we have y equals x squared plus 10x plus 16. Move plus 16 over, to make it say x squared plus bx plus c, just in case you don't know if it is a perfect trinomial or not. Subtract 16 on the right and subtract it on the left. Now you have y minus 16 on the left equals x squared plus 10x. You have to find what c's value is. Remember, c is b's value divided by 2 squared. So 10 divided by 2 is 5 squared, which is 25. That's why we have y minus 16 plus 25 equals x squared plus 10x plus 25. Both of the c's are plugged in. Then take that perfect trinomial. Okay, for number 10, we factor in negative 9x squared minus 6x. What thing goes into both terms, negative 9x squared and negative 6x? Negative 3 definitely goes into both of them, and x goes into both of them. So then when you multiply negative 3x, what do you have to multiply it by to get negative 9x squared? The answer is 3x. What do you have to multiply negative 3x by to get negative 6x? Positive 2. So 3x plus 2. X squared plus 12x plus 27. What you need to do is you need to find your factors of 27, the trinomial. 1 times 27 is 27. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 9 and 1 times 27. So what numbers can you add together and get the number, the middle number, 12? What numbers can you add together and get that? 1 and 27 are either going to give you 28 or 26, not 12. 3 and 9 are either going to give you 6 or 12. So 12, that's the ones we got to use. So open up 2 sets of parentheses. X times x goes first. And then put in 3 and 9. That's going to get you to 12. This sign that is in front of the third one tells you if the signs are going to be the same, both of them positive, positive, or both of them negative, negative. If it's positive, they're the same. If it's negative, they're different. That means one of them will be positive, one negative. We have a positive, so they're both going to either be positive or both negative. Once you know that they're the same, look to the first sign plus. That tells you that they're both plus. So x plus 3 times x plus 9. So it says x squared minus 14x plus 45. Again, you need to find the factors of 45. 1 and 45, 3 and 15, 5 and 9. Which one of those sets can you put together, can you add together to get the number 14, the middle number in the trinomial? 1 and 45 is either going to give you 44 or 46. 3 and 15 is either going to give you 12 or 18. 5 and 9 is either going to give you 4 or 14. So we have to use the terms 5 and 9. That's the only ones that are going to give us that number 14. Remember that first, the sign that's in front of the third trinomial tells us they're going to be the same sign, either plus plus or minus minus. Then the one that's in front of the second term tells us they're both going to be minus. So x minus 5, x minus 9. X squared plus 3x minus 18. Factor out the third one in the trinomial, 18. 1 and 18, 2 and 9, 3 and 6. 3 and 6 is the pair that when you put them together is either going to give you the number 3 or the number 9. We need the number 3. So we have to use the terms 3 and 6. The sign in front of the third number tells you that they're going to be different. If it's minus, they're going to be different. One's plus and one's going to be minus. This sign tells you, since they're different, this one tells you the larger absolute value is going to be plus. So 6 is a higher value. It's plus. They have to be different. So 3 has to be minus. So x minus 3 times x minus plus 6. 14, we're factoring this out. 9x squared plus 30x plus 25. This is a perfect square trinomial because you could take the square root of 9x squared and get 3x and the square root of the third term and get 5, just like we're doing with completing the square. So we have 3x and 5. The sign in front of the second term tells you that it's going to be plus in the middle, and we're going to square it as a binomial. That is factoring it out. Number 15 is the difference of two perfect squares. So it's a trinomial for 14. It's a binomial for 15. But we could take the square root of 36x squared and get 6x and the square root of 25 and get 5. But since it is the difference of them two, that means one's going to be plus, so 6x plus 5, and one's going to be minus 6x minus 5. That's how you write out the difference of two perfect squares. Again, difference meaning subtract in this case. 2x squared equals 10. Normally you work, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, when you're undoing stuff, you work backwards though. So you look for addition and subtraction first. There's no addition and subtraction. Look for multiplication and division. We have 2 times x squared. So divide by 2 to cancel it out. You do it to the left, do it to the right. X squared equals 10 divided by 2 is 5. There's no more multiplication and division, but there's an exponent, x squared. Undo squaring something by taking the square root. You take the square root of the left, do likewise to the right. X equals plus or minus the square root of 5. And we should be able to finish up, the second part should be able to finish up our study guide for today. We'll get back with part 2.